Hello and welcome to the On the Couch podcast, the podcast that gives you the view from the therapist's chair. I'm your host, John Dennis, a licensed professional counselor. You're listening to OTC episode 15 with Heather Jay-Boardman of Blanc Counseling. Welcome back, everybody, on this beautiful March morning. It's sunny. It's a pretty nice day. Yeah, it's pretty cold out. We got some snow on the ground here in Lancaster, but spring is supposedly on its way. We'll see. As always, the number to call in is 717-897-0577, or you can email questions to info@parentfamilysolutions.com and just put podcast question in the subject line. So today I get to broach the dreaded topic of co-parenting, and I was really thankful to be able to steal some of Heather Jay-Boardman's time because she is a super busy lady. She is very good at what she does, is highly sought out in the Harrisburg area for co-parenting. Counseling and mental health counseling as well. But that topic of co-parenting is just such a beast to tackle. I think everybody knows someone that is either going through a divorce, has gone through a divorce, and a lot of times it just does not go well. It a lot of times gets very ugly, very nasty, and that idea of parenting the children while going through a divorce, it can be so contentious and so hate-filled, and to the detriment of our kids. Often they become pawns in this chess match and this race to win, and we a lot of times lose sight over who's really getting hurt here, and are we actually winning or losing, and how it affects everybody involved. So that's part of why I was looking around and wanted to connect with Heather on this topic, because I know it's something that affects a lot of people. Just a little bit about Heather. Like I mentioned, she's a licensed mental health therapist at Blanc Counseling Services, and there she covers, individual, marital, family therapy, as well as co-parenting counseling and reunification therapy. She does collaborative law coaching. She does continuing education services. She's trained in EMDR therapy, so the eye movement desensitization reprocessing or reprogramming. As well as she's a mediator and a collaborative law coach. I mean, she just does it all. And you can really hear in the interview, I mean, she has a lot of fun in the interview, and she's a great person to talk to. She's very personable, but you can also tell, in her role as a co-parenting counselor, she's no nonsense. She does a very good job of not getting played and being neutral, sort of playing it right down the middle to help these families that she works with in navigating co-parenting effectively. So, Heather, thank you so much for being able to be on the Couch podcast. Welcome to the show, and thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to talk about this topic.
Definitely, yeah. It's something I've been looking forward to. For the listeners, you're in the Harrisburg area, close to where our office is for Parenting and Family Solutions, and you and I had connected a while back. Different mutual clients and potential referrals, and kind of, okay, what do you do? So yeah, I know that stuff. The listeners don't. What do you do? What is Blanc Counseling? And how'd you get into this?
So, Blanc counseling has been in the, outside the Harrisburg area for close to 20 years now. And one of the things that we're really well known for is our relationship building and the work that we do with co-parenting and individuals divorcing couples. That's just kind of our niche. And Vivian Blanc and Sharon Starobin started that 20 years ago, and then Vivian took over solo in 2001. And since then, we've just continued to kind of build upon different ways that we can connect with people. So we're a very small practice. Vivian is the owner, and I'm the only other therapist that we have there. And because of that, what's been really great is we've really been able to focus on quality as opposed to quantity. And that's something that's very important to both she and I, is that what we're providing to the community is a quality service that we're known for. Although I see a lot of individuals for struggles that they might be having, anxiety, depression, and so forth. I have a pretty strong background and expertise in trauma. And so I do, get a lot of referrals in that department. A lot of what Vivian and I do is based off the relationships that we have with a lot of the family law attorneys in the area. We get a lot of referrals for individuals that are going through a divorce and or are having struggles with co-parenting. And as a result of that can kind of modify itself into a variety of services that we're providing that are not your standard. I'm coming for individual counseling. I'm coming for this. I might get a referral where I'm kind of meeting with a child to assess how they're tolerating a high conflict divorce situation. And that may roll into, I end up working with the parents separately for co-parenting. And then I work with the parents and the kids together. So it really is an organic process that kind of unfolds. Vivian and I are both collaboratively trained as divorce neutrals. Used to be called divorce coaching, but the name is now divorce neutral. So we're involved in a lot of divorce, and I do a little bit of reunification counseling. So that's it in a nutshell.
Man, and thank you so much for what you do.
Thank you. You too.
I appreciate that. I always say, so I'm on the marriage counseling end of things, the relationship counseling end of things. And so, that idea, oftentimes I think of you and I'm like, oh my gosh, you knowingly, willingly put yourself in between as the neutral, in between two parties that really are struggling to get along, co-parent. And we'll get into that, but, how did you wind up in that space? How did you?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I think probably, as you know, for those of us in the mental health profession, it's not unusual to find yourself in a variety of different positions along the way. It's kind of, you have to put in your time at different places, get your experience. I've been in a few private practices over the last decade or more, I should say. Quite a few private practices, and I've even deviated a little bit and ended up working in a small medical practice as an adjunct with an anesthesiologist. I was there for a number of years. That was a good experience. But I needed a break from clinical practice. I was doing a lot of trauma work. And that's really draining over time because I'm trained in EMDR. So I needed to make a switch. And then when I decided that it was time for me to go back into private practice, I really knew that I wanted to find a place that I wanted to stay, that was going to be a good fit, that I was going to be able to get up every morning and go to work despite how hard the work was and be supported. And the reputation that Blanc Counseling had in the community, I had already been well aware of as a therapist. And so when I sent in my resume and I interviewed with Vivian, I just knew that it was really going to be a good fit for me. We're very aligned in the way that we see ourselves, in terms of providing services to people. She and I really are a good team, a good partnership. And so I knew it was going to be the right place for me to be. And in being in this practice, I've had opportunities that I don't know that I would have ever had if I worked in any other private practice, because we do something that is not really the standard that you see, in a therapist practice, especially not in a, community, a smaller community, non-huge urban area. So that's how I ended up there.
Man. So So interesting. Yeah, like, kind of what you were saying, just the varied background, just the winding path we all take to get where we're at. And just so interesting to some people, like I was saying, like they wouldn't touch this with 100-foot pole, and other people wouldn't, touch other things, EMDR or trauma or things like that. So, wow.
Right.
So, yeah, that idea of what you do specific to the co-parenting, can you kind of explain for the listeners what is co-parenting? I think it's come on so huge in the last, I would say, would you say 2 decades, really?
Yeah, and even more so over, I'd say the last decade in particular. And again, I mean, obviously, some of this is just my opinion and experience where I'm coming from with this. But I think that the family court systems really started learning that they needed to find a new way to manage the conflict that was coming in with divorce proceedings, with child custody cases, that rather than, and again, I can't speak for the court system, but just in my observation, introducing mediation or conciliation into that. Some counties have utilized from, it ebbs and flows based off of funding and a variety of different issues, but parenting coordinators. There's been, I think, a lot of movement to really encourage people to resolve their own disputes. And some counties are bigger on that than others. They really want to see families not first step going to the court system and litigating and having a judge make a decision. So I think that with that came a lot more of this push to go to co-parenting, go to people. And again, I will say that the courts have a tendency sometimes to put their own terminology on things or say, this is what I think is a really great idea. And so Vivian and I have had to have really good boundaries and be really firm about this is what we do and this is what we don't do. But I think that, co-parenting, I think it's a confusing concept. And so one of the things that I am always kind of assessing with people, my process is I meet with each person separately.
What is it you're looking for?
Yeah, exactly. I meet with each person separately before I see them together, just to really get a sense in an unfiltered way. Why are you here? Are you here? Because a lot of times it's because they've been told to. A lot of times people agree, okay, it's a good idea. Let's do this. A lot of time their attorneys say, we really think you should do this. Because again, when you are in the midst of not being able to really communicate and get along and make decisions for your kids, people look to their attorneys, they look to judges, they look to somebody else to make that decision for them. And what the attorneys oftentimes, in particular the experienced good one, family law attorneys, know what you think you're going to get here and what the outcome is going to be are not the same. So I think all of those things have kind of moved people in the direction of work with someone that knows what they're doing, that can help mediate this issue. And fortunately, I have training in mediation, so that's helpful. Work with someone that you can try to see if you can make a dent in some of these issues before you come back to me. Because if you can't do it here at conciliation, it's then going to go to litigation, and you could be doing that for the rest of your life. And ultimately, some people end up there, but it's an opportunity for people in a very, I think, organic, and I don't want to say customized as if it's a service, but it is your process. I mean, I'm the professional, I direct it to a degree, but it's really based off of what people's individual family needs are that they need to work through with my help.
And would you say that's a pretty good, boiled down definition is, them trying to communicate and work through their kids' needs and their family needs, and sometimes they need you as that neutral party to help navigate that.
Yeah, I mean, if people were all able to separate and or divorce and sit down and talk about, right, I wouldn't have a job. So I think in a nutshell, what it really boils down to is two people that are no longer going to be married or living together that ultimately really need to learn how to have an effective mechanism to be able to make decisions, be involved, and really make good decisions in order to be able to support their children in the way that they need to grow. I don't know that I can say it any better than that.
Sure. Well, and I'll give you a chance to sort of reverse engineer it of what do you not do in co-parenting? Because I joke all the time with our intake person. Let me say it into the microphone now for posterity. Parenting and Family Solutions does not do co-parenting, and a lot of people, they call wanting. Either a lot of times they really want a custody evaluation,
right.
But they're trying an end around to get their kid into counseling first and hopefully get the eval or the letter of recommendation out of it. But a lot of times they call our practice asking whether we do co-parenting. So for you, what is it not?
So that's a really good question. And I think some of the issues that you run into are similar to us in that people often, again, especially when the legal system is involved, a lot of times people have an agenda, and it's oftentimes because they don't understand. Sometimes it's desperation. I really need this. I'm really worried, and sometimes misinformed people are told, well, if you go to a counselor or if you go get this done and they say that that's a problem, then we can use this information when we're, so people do the end around as well on our end, asking for evaluations, letters, recommendations. And so I'm court presence, showing up and testifying. I get that a lot more with reunification. And so we really use some of the backbone of our collaborative, divorce process with our co-parenting, and that we very, very much discourage in our language and our presentation. My job is really to help you and help your family. It's not to be a pawn or to be a player in the legal arena. Now, with that said, so no, we don't do evaluations. I'm not going to provide letters to the court on your behalf or anyone else's. What I will do, though, and what I'm a much bigger fan of, is I'll get on the phone with both of your attorneys when needed. And because I think that I also have the ability to help the attorneys be able to get a better understanding of what's going on, so that when they are representing this case, we're really considering the kids more than we are you individually defending your client.
Sure. And sorry to interrupt
please.
Really quick. You're saying conference call both attorneys at the same time?
Yes, okay. Absolutely. That is really our process. And so I will do, and I don't always do it, but I will do check-ins with attorneys. This is the update. This is what's going on. This is what I'm concerned about. I try very hard not to get pulled into conciliation. Sometimes there are certain people that really will request that, but our goal is to not get involved in your legal proceedings, do evaluations, and or make recommendations, because we really want the focus to be on, although it's not therapy per se, this is a therapeutic environment, and it needs to be neutral and it needs to be okay. And I'm doing this because I want to see you be able to be successful in whatever, fashion that can be, in having a better family system or basically making this better for your kids. And I can't do that if I'm involved in your legal stuff. It just doesn't work.
Yeah. And now you mentioned, meeting individually with the parents. Are you also meeting with the children at all?
I typically don't mix that unless it's a situation. And I try to be diligent about what is my role and who am I really kind of serving, because for some of these relationships, they can be ongoing for years. And I'll get into that a little bit more. So if I'm working with a child and they're really struggling with, parents are divorced and they're really struggling, I may in fact pull the parents in from time to time. I may work with them, in whatever capacity. But part of what Vivian and I do in a lot of cases is, if I'm working with a kid, I may in fact refer the parents to her for co-parenting, or vice versa. If she's working with a kid, she may say, you guys really need to work on some co-parenting. Now, certainly we pull parents in and we try to do that stuff, but to give them an opportunity to really have their own process, a lot of times she and I we'll kind of share. We team up a lot, and we have found that to be really, really effective.
Sure. Well, and sorry to jump in again. Just so often, on our end, we're taught, no triangulation.
Right.
Triangulation is bad. You don't want one playing you off the other. So I think, having that in-house, kind of alleviates a lot of that. It
definitely does. We often, find that we really feel proud of the work that we do, regardless of what the outcome is, when we are able to work together like that, because we're just really on top of it and we're able to call it like we see it for everybody that's involved. And I think in my experience for kids, a lot of times that is where I feel like I'm probably the biggest advocate, because they know that I'm on top of it, or Vivian is on top of it, that even if they're not being heard, or, things continue to be stressful, that we're working really hard on our ends for them.
Now, does Blanc Counseling do co-parenting classes as well?
No.
Okay.
Yep. Nope.
Can you sort of explain what that is? Because I think a lot of times that term gets thrown around too, of like co-parenting classes as like, this is court mandated.
Yeah. You're right. And I think, again, it comes down to the notion of not really knowing what co-parenting is, or in particular, when people are court ordered to do it. Some of the counties do offer co-parenting classes. And for some of them, whenever people are involved in any kind of litigation, or, filing any kind of motions for change of custody, depending on the circumstances. I mean, I can't speak to the courts, but they do make people go, or order that people go to co-parenting classes. And those are something very, very specific. They're time limited. There's a structure and a format. And a lot of my clients have shared with me their workbooks or things that they've had, and there's value and there's good tools that are in there. But that is a directive. That is a direct, being talked at, a lesson. And that's just not how we operate. Again, we're really big on relationship building and understanding people's individual needs, as opposed to it being cookie cutter. Not that there's not a value in that, but we're not a cookie cutter office. Everybody's needs are really different. And so if I can only work within one box, I'm not going to be able to help people. So we don't do classes. We don't do groups. We really are more of a, relationship individual service.
And so moving into that space of, what struggles are parents running into in divorce? What are the trends that you're seeing, other than, the obvious of we're divorcing and we don't get along, but what are the trends you're seeing? So
I thought about this question, and it's kind of a roundabout response to that. But one of the things that I think has really changed for me, the direction that this has gone, is when you add the changes. I think about when I was in college, we didn't have cell phones. And so, 20 years ago, when people were divorcing, sure, there were problems, but you can't escape one another anymore. The addition of social media, the ability to text, Facebook, you have instant access. People check up on one another. People are watching what one another are doing. People are commenting on, finding what we're up to. People are hiring private investigators. And I know I'm going like the worst case scenario here, but these are things that people do, and we're naturally curious. And when we feel like we need to be protective of our children, we look for evidence to support that, because that's what we're told we have to do. So for me, one of the trends that I'm seeing in co-parenting is the fact that people have instant access to one another and the ability to check up on one another constantly. And so it feeds this fear that we have that our kids are not okay when they are with the other parent, and the other parent is not doing it as well as I am, or because I have this history with this parent and I know they have a tendency, let's say, to drink, or they drank a lot when we were married, or they lost their temper, and their kids come home and they say, mom didn't get out of bed today. People don't know what to do with that. And so texting, reaching out to other people, checking up on Facebook. So for me, one of the trends that I'm seeing in co-parenting is that has created a lot more problems for people. And those are the kind of things that people are bringing to me. They will bring me copies of emails. They will bring me text messages. They will say, this is what happened on Facebook. People are documenting, screenshotting all of this stuff. And so when we come down and we talk about co-parenting, you have that obstacle in the way. It's tough to, and this is not in all cases, but in a lot of the cases that I see, people have been mounting kind of a case against one another, and oftentimes based off of legitimate fear. But all of this has been done before they're even coming to see me. And so then we're dealing with this.
Sure. Well, and I would imagine it's obviously there was a breakdown in the relationship. There was a breakdown in the communication.
Yep.
And when you're coming to the table with that level of, resentment, and your perspective is, that it's going to make your job really hard, I imagine, and their ability to co-parent that much more difficult. Because I can, I know of personal and professional relationships where it was like, well, how is it you can't pay for your kids' soccer cleats, but you're able to go to Aruba with your new girlfriend, or things like that?
Absolutely, because I saw it on Instagram, and that's what's really hard, is that part of what I see sitting before me is a complete and total lack of trust, and you can't. That is not something that can be developed in a short period of time, coming to, snapping your fingers. We don't have magic. And so all of this really contributes to this lack of trust. And so when you talk about things like, hey, I'm really concerned about the fact that I feel like I'm spending a lot of money on these particular activities, and, you're not contributing to that. And then you get those type of issues. And so I really have to kind of filter through all of that stuff and be able to be very direct with people and say, all of that's really true. But at the end of the day, we have to really focus on what really matters here. And what we're missing is that none of those things are really relevant to your kids. They're relevant to you, but they're not relevant to your kids. And that's hard, really, really, really hard. Sure.
Yeah. I imagine for you to try to, for lack of a better term, like slice through all the BS.
And that's exactly what it is.
Hey, this is not for your kids. You are stay on target.
Right. And so that is one of the things that, for better or for worse, I have a reputation of doing, is slicing through the BS. And, in all honesty, Vivian and I have very similar styles, but different ways of getting there. If I wasn't able to do that, people would be with me. We'd go, it would be a forum. One of the things I feel very strongly about is, it's not a circus and I'm not a referee. And so what I'm not going to do is create an environment where people can come in and just beat one another down and levy things at one another. At a certain point, we're either going to have to get productive with this, or it is what it is.
Well, and interesting that you say that. Not that I want to position you as the ref, but you and I have talked. I mean, we both have, either ourselves a sports background or kids with sports background, and that idea that, they teach refs, like, do not take a side and do not change your position. Like, they will run all over you and they will be controlling things from that point on. Absolutely. And anybody that watches the NFL or any other sport knows that now we have an opportunity through social media and everything else to go after the refs as well. So I already know that I have potential, and I try to be sensitive to the fact that people have fears about coming in to see me. They have fears about what the outcome is going to be, what might happen. They're protective of one another. But what I really feel very strongly about is, I am completely neutral, but at the end of the day, if on a professional level and based off of my expertise and experience, either one of you is doing something that is impacting your kids in a negative way, I'm going to tell you about it. I'm not, and in front of the other person, so that we're in a way that's very diplomatic, so that we understand this is not okay. And I really think that in most of the clients, whether they end up being great co-parents or not, the people that I work well with are the people that end up appreciating that on both ends. You can't change what you can't acknowledge. Yeah. And it made me think of maybe not trends, but other issues that you run into. So is it just the biological or the parents involved in these children and the custody, or like, I can imagine, somebody showing up with their new boyfriend or new husband and, I want them to be a part of it too. And is it like, nope, sorry, like this is just for, how does that work? Yeah, that's a good question, and definitely something that we have run into. And so for me, it really depends on the circumstance. Who I determine needs to be a part of that. One of my beliefs is, if you have two remarried or, girlfriend, boyfriend, fiance, whatever, and that is a problematic relationship, you got to walk before you run. And so if two parents cannot get along with one another and there's hostility towards the additional people, you start bringing all of those people in the room and you immediately have created a circus. But then there are some cases where sometimes the step parent or the fiance is a really great resource, and maybe mom actually likes
dad's new girlfriend or dad's new wife, and maybe those two can actually talk better. So I don't ever say no, because sometimes that is, I always test that water to see whether or not that's a possibility. And because, for example, if I can't tolerate looking at you at a drop off, but she's okay, and I don't really mind her, and I think that she's okay with my kids, then maybe she's the person that gets out of the car and exchanges the backpack and says, Bobby ate a good lunch today. And that can be a reduced situation. But again, there is never a cookie cutter, because so many, the history, the layers, all of the things that happen really have to impact what my decision makes. So there are cases where I absolutely will not involve step parents if there is a reason that they should not be involved. Or I won't say never will I involve you, but mom and dad here have to be able to do this. Adding you to the mix is just another layer that's going to complicate this. So I really have to make that decision based off of my, my assessment of the situation.
Okay. And what are some of the, some of the myths that people come in with?
Well, that I have magic. That's
You don't?
I don't, or a crystal ball. That I'm going to change the other person. That if they can convince me that they are right, or that their position is right, that I will have the ability to change the other person. I will be the judge and jury and executioner. That. Sometimes the myth is that it's going to just be a forum for people to yell at one another, and they don't want to participate in that. And I think sometimes people have a natural fear of doing it because they're afraid that it's going to reflect badly on them in court. So I'd say that those are some of the biggest myths that people have coming in that make them wary of wanting to go forward with that.
Sure. And I mean, I think all of us have heard of those, just horror stories of the kids being used as a pawn and a power play.
Yep.
So I imagine that's often a factor that you're trying to help the parent understand. Like, look, this is not in the best interest of your kid. The way you're going about this.
Yeah, absolutely. I a lot of times, and again, with a lot of sensitivity and empathy, that a lot of times people just do not realize that in their effort or their belief that they're protecting their child from what might happen with the other parent or concerns that they have with the other parent, they are inadvertently putting their children in the middle. And I really do believe that in a lot of cases, that is absolutely not what the intention is or what the parent wants to be doing, but they simply don't know any other way. And so following up with the kids, asking too many questions, asking them basically reporting questions, even if it's not, interrogating, but, was so-and-so over there today, or did your dad drive you in the car? Kids start to pick up on that kind of stuff. So parents oftentimes will inadvertently put their children in the middle. Sometimes you have to be, sometimes parents coach their kids. I mean, there's just a lot of different stuff that happens. And so I always need to be assessing for that and make people aware of it when I think that they're doing it. Again, with a lot of sensitivity, that, listen, I get that this is not what you are intending to do, and that neither one of you wants to put your children in the middle, but you are, in fact. So it's my job to kind of educate people to the things that they may not be seeing.
And are there, resources or books that you've found helpful, videos or other things?
I don't subscribe to any one kind of belief system, because I think people need to find what's right for them. But I find that I am oftentimes encouraging a lot of boundaries resources, because I think that, again, like I mentioned, intrusiveness, not, feeling like they're being checked up on or they're having to report everything to the other parent. People start to, not really take good care of themselves. We're fighting this uphill battle. So, self-awareness, self-care, doing things that are for them, things that are healthy, exercise, really educating themselves about boundaries, boundary resources. There's a lot of great books and websites. I mean, the Boundaries book is, been around forever. It's a good one. And there's also, I was at a training through a man that runs the High Conflict Institute. And so they have a website that also has a lot of really great resources on it that talk about high conflict parenting, how to get to yes, how to approach dealing with. I mean, he has a lot of resources, but particularly for high conflict cases, I like his website.
And I know Getting to Yes is another popular book. Okay.
Yep.
You're listening to OTC episode 15 with Heather Jay-Boardman of Blanc Counseling. We'll be right back after a quick word from our sponsor.
Life is hard, but Parenting and Family Solutions is here to help. Our board-certified counselors are easy to talk to and offer a safe, encouraging environment to help you with your unique needs. We specialize in helping clients of all ages deal with depression, anxiety, marriage issues, screen addiction, and ADHD, just to name a few. We now have daytime and evening appointments available in Harrisburg and Lancaster and accept most major insurance plans. Visit our website to learn more at www.parentfamilysolutions.com or give us a call at 717-602-5560. Let us help you build a stronger family and a healthier you.
Yeah.
Tell me some good news. Tell me some what are some success stories?
I know this is so tough. I've given presentations, particularly to attorneys, many times, and I feel like we always spend the first half talking about the worst, and you can't. I don't know that you can talk about co-parenting without that being somewhere in there. But yes, I'm glad you asked that. And so, this is kind of one of these slow and steady wins the race sort of situations for me. Over the years, I've had people come into my office that we're talking. We've been doing this for many years. Maybe we've had multiple custody evaluations. Maybe we have a guardian ad litem that's appointed to the case. I mean, like as worse as it can get, or people who, when I know that they're coming into my office, I have to mentally and physically get myself ready to endure the level of intensity. That those have been, over the years, some of my cases that I never would have imagined in a million years that we were able to get to the point that we get. And it doesn't happen overnight. And sometimes these are people that work with me very intensely in the front end, and then it gets stretched out over time. Where I feel like things are successful is when people learn to use me. So I have some families that I might have been working with them on and off, and 2 years later, they say we've run into an issue and we need to talk about how to deal with this with the kids. That to me is a success story. When people learn how to utilize me or Vivian or anybody that does this kind of work successfully, that they realize, look, we realize that if we do this together the way we all used to do it, this is not going to go well. So for me, that is when I know we have done good work. And when parents are able to pull back the brakes on going to court, when they recognize, I'd rather come into Heather's office and kind of hash this out or mediate this out. I don't want to put my kids through a visit to the judge or another, or them know that we're doing this. When people get past the fighting and start doing the work. And sometimes those cases are not, I wouldn't have anticipated that they would get to that place. Sometimes I really have to hang in there. Honestly, sometimes these are cases where I feel like, look, I've given everything that I can give. I don't have a whole lot. Sometimes I have to give people a timeout. Sometimes I have to say, listen, we're really up here, and I think you need to step back from this a little bit and create some space between, this is intense, we need to create some space. And they will still call me after 6 months, a year and say, we've run into a snag. And that's when I know I'm getting somewhere with people, because they're starting to get it. They're starting to realize, or they'll say, I had somebody come in this week and say, and somebody I really didn't feel like I was getting through to on any level, came back and said, I really have spent the last couple of months, and I'm paraphrasing and modifying, I'm not directly quoting, but I had to really step back and think about some of the things that you've said and really let it sink in, that what I'm trying to get to is not going to be what's best for my kids. And I'm trying to take control over something I don't have control over. And so I need to just try to do this with my ex. I need to do this with their other parent, or this is going to wreck them. And I've been able to recognize that, and I'm willing to let go of that fight. I can't always anticipate that that's going to happen, but when it does, that's when I really know. And so hearing from people down the road and recognizing, hey, I don't really like you. I don't want to go to Starbucks with you. I don't agree with a lot of the stuff.
I don't want to strangle you every time I see you, at least.
Right. And even sometimes they do. But what they've recognized is if we don't unite, like think about teenagers. And again, you understand this in working with working with that population. When you start getting to the teen years, kids are self-preservation mode. You got to worry about sneaking around. You've got to worry about lying. You've got to worry about a lot of, having their phones at school, the stuff that they're doing. Parents, one of the things that I say a lot is, if you keep doing what you're doing, let me tell you what you're looking at when your kid gets to high school. And then I work with some of these people and their kids get to high school and it's like, oh yeah, if we don't align in this, at least parents who are really concerned about what's going on, we've got a sinking ship here. And the only way to keep that afloat is if you and I are on. And so I really preach kind of that whole way of looking at that. So we see good. We see good. It can be a rough, long road to get there.
And I'm so glad that you said that and that you spell that out. I think that definitely bears repeating. I made me think of there's a human trafficking curriculum I think it was Fairfax County, Virginia, called Tricked. And the one school psychologist, it's always stuck with me. He basically said, if you don't pay attention to your kids, somebody else will. And if you guys can't get your crap together and, at least, some kind of working relationship, somebody else is going to start paying attention to your kid and they're going to start going to somebody else for that attention. So.
Yep, you got it. And as direct as I am, those are both Vivian and I in different ways. Those are the kind of things that we say. And where I feel so thankful is that I can think of a lot of cases, families where they have resources, where they have money, activities, all of these resiliency factors that we know about. But the parents are so embroiled in their battle and in their conflict that kids do not feel seen and heard, and the behaviors that can start to happen as a result of that. I'm thankful that I'm there and available to see that, so that is where I see myself as an advocate for those kids, that I can look at those parents and say, you are so unaware of what's going on. And if you don't get it together, this is what, or in fact, we've already gone in that direction. And then I'm trying to, get the kids, out of that so that they at least know that I see them. But not all kids have access to people like you and I.
And in terms of, are there specific tools that you typically walk people through or exercises? I don't know if you're able to share one or two, or.
I'm not a huge exercise person.
Okay.
I'm not a huge scripted sort of person. But one of the things that I will say that I tend to, I really try to focus people when I find them kind of venting or ranting. What are we offering? What is it that I really try to structure people's kind of uncoordinated thought process and ranting. I try to really kind of put it out there for them in a way that we're having opportunities, to really communicate what it is that we need and what we want versus what we don't want and what's happening. So I really try to focus on that and make that very, very clear and apparent. Parts of what I do that I do find are a little bit more structured as I really like to see people following a more business-like approach to co-parenting. I've had occasional people rebuff that, but I mean, if you look at a lot of the literature, you have to, you wouldn't send an email to your boss that basically says, and you did this and you do this and F you and what were you thinking? this goes back to the bill, Eddie, the High Conflict Institute. It's known as a BIF response: brief, informative, friendly, and firm. I will practice exercises with people or people that I know are particularly problematic via text or via email. Sometimes I will, for homework, I will give them assignments or ask them to bring me in what their communication has looked like. And I do this with solo people too that have high conflict relationships. Really just kind of reviewing where we went wrong and letting me educate them and work with them on understanding, I get where you were going with this, but here's why this didn't work. So maybe like some writing exercises and so forth. But I really reserve that more when it's kind of needed. But I do try to get people on a structure of, you should not be text messaging one. Like, here's when you should be texting. Here's when you should be emailing. You really need a shared Google Calendar. It's not one person's individual responsibility to disseminate that information to everybody. So there are cases where I feel like people really do need that structure because they can't create it for themselves, that I will help them create it when needed. And
that brings up another question of, do you typically recommend, because I know there are, communication platforms for co-parenting.
Yes.
Is that one you guys have set up, or that's one that's through the court or through their attorneys, or It can be any combination. There's not one that I like more than another. And honestly, most people have been ordered to use some, like My Family Wizard, or there's a lot of people will resist those things because they're not free, or they are not user friendly, or they don't work as well with your Android. So I'm really open to whatever works for people. Sometimes those will be assigned, but I go back to an old-fashioned shared Google Calendar. Sometimes if you can just have a shared Google Calendar, because people fight over, well, you didn't tell me, or I didn't know. I also think that those are helpful for kids, because kids need to, they need to know. They need to know. They need to know what's going on in their life, who's picking me up, what's that structure look like. So it depends. It really depends. Well, and another very good point. I always tell people, especially for kids, but just humans, like we deep down, we need order and structure. Yes, and absolutely. We want to know what is going on. Nobody wants that, the kid that I was the last to get picked up, or you forgot me, or, that sticks with your kid for forever. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. And, that's something that I talk a lot about with people that come to me who are newly divorcing or haven't told the children yet, or, they're in a collaborative divorce, and that's step one. We know we're getting divorced. We don't know how to tell the kids. Your kids need to know that they're going to be okay. You need to know what the plan's going to be. They're going to need structure, all of those things. So I 100% agree. Awesome. So I did want to ask, we had an online question get submitted from one of our listeners. Great. We have Joanne in Columbia, Maryland, who wanted to ask, what can I do best to make co-parenting go well? What can she do on her end to make it go smooth? So, just speaking in general terms without obviously knowing what the specifics, in her particular family situation are, you need to be a good communicator. You need to be willing to not withhold information. You need to be willing to share. At the end of the day, our kids are 50% of each of us. And so when you speak negatively or make facial expressions or inadvertently exclude another parent, that has a direct effect on how the child feels about themselves. If you discredit a parent or you make them non-existent, the child feels that, long term, it says something for them. So being mindful of the fact that even if you don't particularly care for your ex, your child does, and removing that parent or discrediting that parent or shutting them in a bad light sets that child up to have a conflicted relationship with them long term. They won't thank you for it, unless your child is in immediate danger. I assure you that, or an abusive situation, no kid looks back and says, they will ask questions.
Why? Yeah, right. Why were you not there? Why was I not important? Why did you just not come around? So, so we have to really suck it up and remember that our kids are watching and they need us to do a good job making it not tense. So things like not making it awkward at sporting events or preschool pickup, pick and choose. Listen, if you know that you really have a hard time being around your ex in certain circumstances, okay, put another person in your place, but make sure that when you're explaining to your kid, hey, have a great weekend with your dad. You guys are going to have a great time. I hear you're going to be going to a baseball game. That's great. Grandma's going to take you to meet dad today because I have some other things going on, but I hope you have a great time. So really making sure that your kid, you are doing whatever you can to let your kids know, Dad and I still love you. We are working together. We may not have it perfect, but we are working together to make sure that you guys are okay. That's what they really need to do. So whatever it takes to get to that place in your own family is what you should be doing. You got to be willing to do it.
Man, that's such good advice. And is it safe to say, so on my end in Gottman counseling, usually I'm talking with people about, they talk about two spheres of, you have the flexible part of you and the inflexible part of you, and like trying to be as flexible and accommodating. Meanwhile, keeping the boundaries in the background, in the back of your mind, kind of balancing act.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that that's part of where that comes in. And if listen, I'm in a lot of pain here and it's very challenging for me to see you in certain circumstances right now. What do I need to do in order to make it okay for my kids while managing? If I know I can't be in front of you because it's so painful for me that if I do it and I'm going to cry at seeing your presence, what can I do to set a boundary, but also being flexible and saying, hey, you're going to go with your dad and we're still going to get you there. I'm not going to prevent that from happening. And I'm going to put on a brave face while being able to manage my own stuff. So it really does require an ability to step back and look at those two spheres and know what you can manage and what you can't. And I know people can get there. It just takes time.
Yeah, and oftentimes, with the couples counseling, I'm saying like, look, any two people can do this. Like, it is doable. Like, you just have to want to, and you have to put the time and the effort in.
Right. And timing matters. And so for some people, the time to really focus on co-parenting in the way that I'm able to provide it, timing matters. People are not always able to do that stuff. Sometimes they need less is more. Sometimes people are able to basically communicate with one another in an effective way for a period of time, but then it doesn't work anymore, and then they need to reevaluate it and look at it differently. So I also believe that timing matters. Throwing two people in a room and asking them to be able to tolerate one another, sometimes that's simply not possible. Sometimes people are better able to do that with more boundaries in place and a bit more structure.
Man, I'm so glad we've had the chance to talk. So what's something, if you were talking to, every parent on the planet that was going through this, what would you want them to know before coming either to you or to co-parenting?
I would want to say I feel so thankful as someone that really feels strongly about how divorce and conflict impacts kids long term. You've got to give yourself a lot of credit for walking through the door, whether you really want to or not. Walking through the door and saying, look, I don't want to do this, but I'm going to try. I give you a lot of credit because it is tough and I get it. And sitting across from somebody that you don't particularly like and you have strong feelings towards from your marriage, that is the first step in putting your kids first. And so I give you a lot of credit just for walking through the door. The second part of that I think I would want to say, as advice to parents and understanding this whole process is, this is about your kids. You're trying to co-parent because you want to be able to give your kids the best chance at being able to navigate life without conflict. It's your conflict. It doesn't have to be theirs. They see you. They're watching you, whether you think that they are or not, whether you think that by hiding out back and freaking out or screaming or that you're talking quietly, to grandma and the kids don't hear. They're watching you. They see you and they need you to put that aside in their presence because they feel it. Whether you think that they do or not, they carry those burdens, and then they begin really modifying how they approach both of you based off of what they are getting. And that includes extended family. So, you need to understand when you're walking through my door, your kids are already watching you. So you need to be open-minded, just like I said, to the question to your listeners, is you've got to be willing to do what it takes to reduce that opportunity from infiltrating, your family.
Yeah. Like I said, it's just so obvious in talking with you, how good you are at this, and
I appreciate
the expertise you have. So, how do people find Blanc Counseling?
So, we've been at the same place for a long time. You never know. People have to move around and stuff. But right now, for the time being and for the past almost 20 years, we are right off Erford Road, kind of sandwiched by Harrisburg Hospital and Holy Spirit. We like our location because we're split in between West Shore, East Shore. So we have people that come from both places. We're easy to access. We're right in the middle there. Our phone number is 717-303-5960. We do have a website, www.blanccounseling.com. I can give you that. We have a nice website. You can, kind of look around and look at our resources, a little bit about us.
And let me jump in really quick. So the Blanc is like Mont Blanc, the pen. So like BLANC. Yep.
And C, and then another C for counseling. So full name Blanc Counseling, all one link. We're pretty easy to find.
And is there a preferred way for people to access services of emailing, calling in, doesn't matter?
So calling is, I do get a lot of people that email me, especially when they're, individual referrals. Hey, so-and-so told me to call you, including attorneys. So I get a lot of attorney referrals. Phone is really the best. And I'll tell you why, because admittedly with a small practice, and I think, as you know, because we are kind of a niche service, I'm very full. Vivian's schedule is very, very full. And so it's really important to me. Again, quality over quantity. It's really important to me. And I think it's hard for consumers to understand this. If I took every case that was referred to me, I would not be able to provide a quality service. And as a human being, I need to be able to manage how many co-parenting, how much, or I'm not going to be any good at this. So I really like when people call, as long as you're willing, give my office manager as much detail as you can about what you're looking for, why you're calling, what it is that you need. Let her give you some basic information. I review those cases and make a determination from there based off of what it looks like they may need. Sometimes people might say, I can only come in the evening, or I'm coming from California on the weekends, and I can't do that. So I like when people call in, give as much detail as possible. Listen, I try to get as many people as I can, but I cannot take every case. So the more information you give me, the more willing you are to kind of explain your circumstances, the better I'm able to quickly decide whether or not I can take you on or not.
Sure. And are you open to, if listeners have questions, even out of state, or, obviously there's the legal caveat of...
Yes.
And that two questions that brought up of, let's say we have somebody who, they're in another state, they're in Colorado or California or wherever. Where would you recommend they go to find good co-parenting?
So that's a good question, because honestly, there have been a lot of people out of state that have reached out to me for either reunification counseling or co-parenting counseling, Skype. And it's really tough because possibly they have an attorney here. If you go, think places like High Conflict Institute, or there is a co-parenting, institute, or even look for your family law section. What is the family law section in your particular county? There's usually a head of a family law section. For example, Dauphin County, Cumberland County, there will be a family law person, a designated person. They usually have a decent amount of resources.
Yeah, they have a list.
They have a list. Also, if you look up, any kind of collaborative groups that there are that include mental health professionals, you usually should be able to find somebody that has some sort of information. I think fortunately for these two counties, Dauphin and Cumberland, which I work with a lot, the attorneys within those counties, they do know who we are and know who the other people are. And when they trust you, they will also trust your referrals and your resources. So they're always looking for good therapists as well that they can entrust their clients. So reach out to your local family law attorneys in your state, and find out, hey, who are the good therapists, the trained therapists in your area that you might be able to give me suggestions.
Sure. And are there particular projects that you're working on for 2019 now, or?
I wouldn't say a project. I would say, again, Vivian and I continue to be really focused on providing good quality work. And so in whatever avenue that is, we really enjoy working, doing the collaborative, being divorce neutrals and those proceedings. So continuing to build relationships, I think, with the individuals in our community, the attorneys, educate people. The more I can interact and I can work with people like yourself, some of the attorneys that refer to me, to really understand what it is that we can do and what we can offer, we're really able to work more together and collaboratively to try to provide, good quality to these families. So I think really just trying to continue doing what we're doing. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to make sure I don't spread myself too thin. Really just trying to make sure that our office, that we are efficient, that we are getting people in, that we are able to provide the services, and that we continue to be firm about doing what we do and not what we don't do, and providing those services to the people that really need it and want it.
Awesome. Well, and you mentioned a bit ago the speaking to attorneys and things like that. How far do you go? Like, how far will you travel to speak to attorneys? If people wanted to get in touch with you for that, how would they hit you up?
So, I think just personally emailing me or contacting my office and setting up a phone call. Vivian and I have been asked to sit on a couple of panels out of area, and really it has to make sense, because again, any time that we're taking away from our day doing something like that is time away from our clients, and there's only so many hours in a week. So
if there's like a Caribbean cruise,
if there's a Caribbean cruise and
yeah.
I'm there, call me.
Yeah.
Especially now, I need a vacation. Listen, I appreciate people reaching out and just having a talk. The times that I have spoken is when attorneys that I know and that I work with and that value what we do have reached out and said, Heather, will you come present at our Bar County Association? So really just reaching out to me if it makes sense and I kind of know you and I know what you're going to be asking and it's in line with where I'm at. I do the best that I can to be there.
Okay. And the one other question that it made me think of is, you said you're very busy right now. A lot of times this time of year is very busy for me in terms of the couples counseling, because it's sort of the unofficial divorce season. Is there ebb and flow to it? Are there trends that way in terms of volume?
Yes. And we, for the life of us, sometimes you feel like you figure out a trend and then that theory is blown to
it's like parenting.
It's like parenting, right? Summer is usually slower in terms of if I had to say a trend, I think summer is slower because, listen, kids are out of school, people are vacationing. It starts really picking up towards the end of August when people are going back to court or things are being court ordered or school is starting and people are starting to fight over those kind of issues. So things really do start to pick up during the fall. This has been one of my busiest winters, I can say, of all time. I don't know why. So I think more than anything, there is a downtick during the summer and an uptick when school rolls around. And that's usually because people are revisiting their custody orders, their custody agreements. For some of my co-parenting cases, we'll pick, I have some people that just come see me maybe once a year or twice a year to revisit, hey, we talked about a change in custody. We talked about revisiting some of the issues. Let's come back in June so we can have that figured out before kids go back to school. But in general, there's a downtick in summer.
Okay. All right. again, just thank you so much for being able to share of your time. I know you're very busy, very popular with what you do, and sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad.
Yeah.
But definitely, I look forward to staying in touch with you and collaborating with you, and hopefully, I will be able to have you back on in the future to follow up and see how things are going. So yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I enjoyed being here, and I'm always willing to tackle questions, anything I can do.
Awesome. Well, take care.
Thank you. You too.
Bye.
Bye.
Gosh, I just loved that I had a chance to talk with Heather about that. And like I said, I know that's such a huge, huge topic with so many families going through divorce out there and trying to navigate it. I know that not everybody is out for blood, and a lot of people do want to co-parent effectively. And I'm so glad that Heather and Blanc Counseling are there as a referral source. And she's so knowledgeable and so approachable. She's so willing to respond to any questions or any way that she can help people. So I would, if you have any, I would highly encourage you to reach out to her and get in touch with her. So that ends episode 15. Next up is OTC episode 16 with Dr. Jeremy Sharp, the host of the Testing Psychologist podcast. He and I get to sit down and talk about testing psychology and what goes into that, what clients can expect, and just trying to give sort of a testing psychology 101. So please join us next episode. Take care. If you liked what you've heard on the podcast, please be sure to subscribe and review wherever you're catching this podcast at. You can check out any links and resources on our detailed show notes or other episodes that have been archived at www.parentfamilysolutions.com/podcast. If you want to catch up on what Parenting and Family Solutions is doing, be sure to follow us on any of your favorite social media apps. This is your host, John Dennis, saying good night. The author and host of this podcast is not engaged in a therapeutic relationship with the listener and cannot give counseling advice without a confidential appointment. Listeners should be sure to consult with a licensed therapist in their area or seek emergency medical attention if they are experiencing psychological difficulty. A special thanks to the Topsy-Turvies for the show theme song. Their song, Like a Living Dead, can be found at topsyturvies.bandcamp.com. The bump interview track was the song 1973 by Bruno E. The author and host of this podcast is John Dennis. Special thanks to producer and editor Trevor Groff.